So Tony Ferguson has some interesting comments about his fight with Charles Oliveira. And for some reason, I don't know why, I was expecting a more level-headed or reasonable Tony Ferguson to talk about his loss, his dominant loss, to Charles Oliveira, but that is not what we got. Now, I did this for Conor McGregor when he talked about his loss to Khabib. So here we're going to break down what Tony Ferguson had to say about his loss to Charles Oliveira, and frankly, it's also pretty delusional. Not on the same level though. So Tony starts with an Instagram post. If you guys want to check it, the link's in the description box. Now, this is going to be very hard to decipher because it's Tony Ferguson we're talking about, and every word is capitalized. Quote, "My crew, no excuses, I fell flat. I went out and welcomed the attack instead of defending. The warm-up time in the back for UFC has been the same since pre-COVID. Still no excuses. Times change, and so do people. The time from hotel to UFC Apex is much more condensed, and the aggressive level we needed was not reached. My fault 100. After the fight, we were checked by doctors and went back to the hotel. I felt it was in order to hit pads and spar immediately because the fight was fresh in my mind and blood circulation in my arm was needed. I really needed to figure out what the problem was from the fight." Solution. So Tony here is starting to make excuses about, the preparation in the UFC facility was kind of not where it needed to be. Like, it probably would have made some kind of difference if there was an audience, if he was more aggressive in the fight, which that I do agree with. I think everybody agrees that if Tony Ferguson was more aggressive in the fight like usual, he probably would have had better results. But pointing to the backstage workout and stuff like that is a little bit iffy. And he's also correlating this to his loss to Justin Gaethje, saying that the warm-up time in the back has been the same since pre-COVID, which also covers the Justin Gaethje fight. Make it kind of a sneak excuse to that one as well. The thing about the hotel being condensed is a little bit weird. I think it has nothing to do with his loss. He's just pointing to things that he probably believes is a reason why he lost, because you have to remember about fighters, they tend to be very delusional. I mean, you have to be kind of delusional to get into that cage and fight someone else in order to believe in yourself that you're going to beat this other professional fighter. You're going to have to believe in things that aren't realistic, and that goes hand in hand with losses. Fighters tend to make excuses to things that don't take part of reality as an excuse to themselves, not to the audience, but to themselves as to why they lost. They cannot believe they lost to the other guy because they can never put in their mind that they're worse than the guy they fought. The most they will say is they were the better fighter that night. And most of the time when fighters say that, they don't actually believe it. And then he continues, pre-fight time management. Now, this is the interesting stuff. Chuck was looking to take my back and go for the armbar as soon as we hit the mat. Thus, I didn't worry about the mount. Kid was slick, but so am I. I was looking for the knockout standing and Darce from the bottom position once we hit Jits transitions. It was fun fighting against a wet blanket, aka heavy pressure opponent. Mark my words, that scenario won't happen again, period. My arm is alright, the armbar was really tight. The thought of my son, Armin Anthony's ability to be double jointed in his elbow during that sequence, and my mental capacity to endure the pain got me through it. Breathe, #mental toughness. This is interesting. So he kind of gives some credit to Charles Oliveira being very good on the ground. He knew that Charles was trying to look for his back or get that armbar, and says that he's a heavy pressure opponent, which is 100% true. But where it gets a little bit delusional here is where he starts to say, I didn't worry about mount. The kid was slick, but so am I. He's giving himself some credit. Again, that delusion that my opponent was really better than me. I just made mistakes. He said he was looking for the knockout, which was evidently not true. And the Darce from the bottom position, that was one time, that was like the lone moment in the entire fight out of like 10 minutes on the ground. That was the only thing he ever did that showed some kind of fight back to the dominance of Charles Oliveira. That was like the only thing throughout 8 to 10 minutes. He doesn't want to acknowledge that Charles was the better fighter that night. And the crazy thing when he says I'm not worried about his mount because he was more worried about the armbar and the back take is crazy. You never want to get mounted. I mean, this is not a new problem for Tony Ferguson. He's been mounted multiple times throughout his UFC career, and it seems to be something he's not really addressed. We also have to point out that Eddie Bravo wasn't in his corner, so maybe he wasn't really prepared correctly for this fight, maybe being more focused on his own gym and trying to get into this fight with his own trainers, as he likes to put it. But I believe I have to go watch it again. I think Danny Castillo also got in mount. Kevin Lee got into mount pretty easily, and Oliveira did as well. That is one of the worst positions you ever want to be on the ground. You never want to welcome it or say I'm not worried about it. No, you never want to get in that position. And the fact that he alluded to that he was more cautious of the armbar, but still getting caught in one, tells you the story about what he was able to do off his back compared to what he's saying he actually did. And there's also evidence in the fight. For an example, you can look at the first round around 2 minutes and 51 seconds or so. When Oliveira was transitioning into mount, Tony tried to stop Oliveira from getting into it. So this whole thing about him not caring that Oliveira is getting into his mount is again falsified. I could be wrong, but it sounds like an excuse for him falling into mount again, right? That was a big narrative about the Kevin Lee fight. Oh, he got into mount on Tony Ferguson. He got into mount. That's a big thing. Now, Oliveira does it multiple times very easily, and it seems like an excuse he's trying to make, like saying, I didn't even care. Like, I was more focusing on attacking. I wasn't really caring what he was trying to do. It was just the submissions and stuff like that I was more cautious about. But he got caught in a submission, so it didn't really matter what he was cautious about. He still got put in it, and it further denies his attempt to kind of disregarding the mount transitions. And there's some other stuff like a video and other things that also address this point and point to some of his delusion as to what was happening on the ground. So then he continues. One, I'm beyond grateful and thankful for my talents. I have learned so much about myself this year and what my purpose in life is. My search for that epic word called greatness isn't over. Understand, crew, we are far from being retired. So message to my haters. Shabam, shout out to my team I put together on 3 weeks notice. Notice how he says 3 weeks notice. We're still green, boys. Thanks for not deserting me. Team, we're barely scratching the surface to what we can truly accomplish, and for what I say, amen. It was great making weight and being around my fight fam for the week. I can't wait till we compete in front of a big crowd. It's not the same without you all. Recovery mood, happy holidays, crew. Champ shit only, and mi gente, never give up and keep the faith, champ. And here he posts about him almost getting a Darce choke from the bottom on Charles Oliveira. It seems he's fixated about this moment. It seems like he's thinking about this moment as a way to tell people, look, I was actually competitive in the fight. And he actually says in a video that he was competitive in the fight, or that Charles wasn't actually dominating him. So he says here, high level patience, Darce master flex. Should've went bull cutter instead of a short Darce. No gi jiu-jitsu talk. Mac, no excuses. Extra push-ups, oh well, next time. The fact that he posted this tells you a little bit of where his mind is really set on. And the fact that he said he should have went for the bull cutter shows that he understands he made a mistake, but he's also very fixated of this very brief couple seconds of the entire 15-minute fight. And finally, here's a video of him talking about what happened in the fight and his perspective of it.
Right there. We're not going to waste any energy here. You guys shouldn't either in jiu-jitsu matches. Just be patient. Wait for the opportunity for him to advance and get so lazy that in the third round, he doesn't even advance to mount anymore. What he does is he stays controlled in a side position looking for something completely different move, because he was mentally broken the first round. I went back and kind of watched film, and without the commentary and how like, oh, you got dominated, this and that. Okay, to the untrained people, in jiu-jitsu, advancing positions in traditional style martial arts, you will get points, advantages, and you will get different types of points. But the judging and the contesting as far as in the commission, I don't even know if it's there. I'm gonna be real, I don't.
Now notice what Tony Ferguson is showing here on the screen. For anybody that doesn't know, this is actually 2 minutes and 51 seconds of the first round. And Tony Ferguson says that he's not worried about this hook that Charles has in, but this is in fact how Charles Oliveira was able to transition right into side control and then right away into full mount. And Tony Ferguson, in fact, does attempt to get out of this full mount position, contrary to what he says in his Instagram post. And Charles just holds that position for the rest of the round up until that armbar that almost submits Tony Ferguson. So the weirdest thing about everything here is the fact that Tony said that he mentally broke Charles Oliveira, or Oliveira mentally broke in this first round. This is the very round that Tony claims that Oliveira mentally broke, which is crazy because look at the second round, he completely stacked and controlled the entire round on top. And then in the third round, Charles Oliveira almost gets him in a high risk triangle choke mid-transition. No one who's mentally broken is going to go for something like that. Oliveira was very confident on top, could have went for an armbar, but ultimately didn't do so, most likely due to the fact that Tony was not going to tap. He knew that he didn't want to injure Tony Ferguson. I hear some people say that Oliveira didn't want to risk going for the armbar. Yeah, he went for this risky triangle choke, and we're talking about Charles Oliveira, guy who flies into armbars and Peruvian neckties and stuff. And here's the crazy thing. Tony said Oliveira never got into full mount in the third round. He literally does. You can go to 3 minutes and 4 seconds of that round. He's literally in full mount on top of Tony Ferguson. This is right before the triangle choke. So it's just crazy, man. Then Tony starts talking about the rules of MMA compared to the rules of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Says he doesn't know the rules of MMA. Well, that's entirely the fighter's fault. Like, every fighter should know what the rules are. Everybody should know what the judging criteria is. It's not even super in depth or anything like that. It's very easy to read. So simply just transitioning is not going to give you a whole lot, especially when Oliveira's punching you in the face. If you get punched in the face, well, there's no punches in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu tournaments. So how can you really correlate each other when strikes are involved, right? Just simply transitioning. Yeah, you can transition all you want, which is actually Oliveira transitioning, getting full mount and stuff like that. He should get the points, if anything, in that aspect. But he's also elbowing and punching Tony in the face at the same time. ultimately, it's pretty much the end of it. Now, this is no surprise if you've seen the Conor McGregor stuff when he was talking about the Khabib fight. That was even more delusional, and you'll be very surprised if you keep going back and seeing how fighters look at fights. Sean O'Malley, for example. Sean O'Malley thinks he never even lost the fight. You'd be shocked how far fighters' delusions go in terms of competition due to save confidence. Because if they admit to certain things about a fight, it could shatter their confidence. They could ultimately not be the same again. That same confidence is what's getting them into the cage. That is pretty much what they're clinging on so they can actually pursue this kind of sport. So what Tony Ferguson said about all this doesn't really surprise me too much, to be honest. It's very regular stuff from fighters. I mean, if you've ever been to a gym and a fighter comes back and, loses a fight, you would see this as well. There'll be a little bit of a depression state, but with that comes a lot of denial, especially when they're in private or when they're simply just talking with their coaches. And a lot of times, coaches, the fact that Tony Ferguson has no head coach, has no formal training camp, I don't think anybody's in there telling him what's really going on. He's kind of his own head coach and everybody just follows suit. Right, if you look at some of his videos of him reacting to the Khabib and Justin Gaethje fight, how his whole gym kind of just parades him it's almost like everybody's a fan of him. And it's very hard not to be a fan of Tony Ferguson, but this is where a formal training camp is going to really come in handy. The fact that Eddie Bravo was even there is kind of a bummer, right? Eddie Bravo would probably bring some things into light, or any other coach, if he was with Trevor Whitman and stuff like that. Then again, that's not who Tony Ferguson is. He's not had a head coach for a very long time, and that's who ultimately made him who he is. The fact he's coming off another loss, and he has a whole new training camp of people, I could be wrong, I can absolutely be wrong, of many trainers who aren't challenging him mentally and bringing him into reality to learn many things. It looks like he's learning himself, and that's pretty much it. In this kind of state after a loss like this, he definitely needs someone to sit him down and bring him into reality and tell him what's really going on and where he really made mistakes from a different point of view, from a third party who generally tends to be the most accurate perspective. That would be a huge benefit for Tony at the moment. So very interesting. Not as bad as Conor McGregor, I'll admit to that, and definitely not as bad as Sean O'Malley. But this stuff is always very interesting. The mental part of the fighter, especially after losses. I mean, it's a very interesting place to dive in, because a lot of people, especially a lot of fans, don't actually know where a fighter's head is at after a loss, especially when they're starting to get past that depression state. They get into this hard denial state right afterward. And yeah, I wish fighters talk about it a little bit more, to be honest. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to thumbs up. If you enjoyed my content, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.